Married people of Reddit, what were your first thoughts upon meeting your future spouse? I thought she had great legs. The first time I laid eyes on my future wife, she was coming down the stairs of the music building wearing a short plaid skirt. She had just finished her audition for a scholarship. I was downstairs hanging out with some folks from the orchestra. My friend Sandy pointed her out and told me that my future wife, FW, was a friend from high school. I told Sandy that FW had nice legs and promptly went back to hanging out. Fast forward to August of the same year and I hear a knock at my apartment door. It was Sandy with FW. I invite them in and Sandy says, "More than let me introduce you, Mangled Pumpkin, this is FW. FW, this is Mangled Pumpkin. He thinks you have nice legs." That was how I met my wife. We met when we were invited over to supper, separately, by a couple we knew. I thought her eyes were the prettiest thing I'd ever seen. And we got to talking. She was the first Hungarian I had ever met. I was a little unclear on whether that was Budapest or Bucharest, but she set me straight very quickly indeed. I was the first American she had ever met. We met up another time or two. Then I lost track and saw her again just before she was leaving town, Stuttgart, then West Germany. She led me to believe my interest was mutual. So I did the natural thing. I wrote her a 17-page love letter, obsessed about her for about a week. Then, on a conveniently scheduled vacation visiting friends in Belgrade, I obtained a visa. Oh, how difficult those days were. Hopped a train and looked up her address in Budapest. Fortunately, I had learned to distinguish it from Bucharest already. Otherwise this part may have been difficult. Her mom answered the door. We had about 5 words of German in common, but she still managed to explain I should sit tight and wait. She fed me soup. It was really good. Then my future wife returned home to find me taking a nap in her own bed, having been out to the post office mailing her answer to my 17-page letter. Anyway, that was 26 years ago. I still think her eyes are the prettiest thing I've ever seen. Edit. Looks like about 90% AWW, 10% creepy guy responses, and 1 sounds fake as duck guy. That probably needs to get out more. For the creepy guy people, I did leave out quite a lot of detail because this wasn't a novel writing prompt. There were 3 or 4 dinner dates, a long walk in the rain, sitting in my car talking until 2 AM, and a heartfelt farewell at the train station. I want to say tearful, but it wasn't. We weren't alone, for one thing, and we weren't quite sure about the whole thing yet. I even made her a tape on a cassette. She had no idea why I thought that might have been romantic, but it was quite clear to me that 1. She was just as interested as I was, and 2. If I didn't act, I would be writing this post right now on Reddit. 26 years into a lonely, childless future, crying about the one who got away. I had amazing powers of prescience. I'm not normally one to act decisively, but this one time, I did. And this one time it was the right thing to do. Her mom let me in and fed me soup because my future wife was, of course, pretty ecstatic to get my letter indicating that I had no intention of letting our brief 1-week romance be all we had together. We were both science junkies who loved travel and languages, which has really come in handy, and who grew up in blue-collar families with a less than positive view of science, travel, and languages. Now she has a doctorate in theoretical physics and I run a translation business online, and we alternate between Budapest, Indiana, and Puerto Rico. Currently we've been in Budapest for 3 years. I don't want to make it sound easy. Clearly, marriage is not easy. We've had very bad times indeed, and very good times indeed. That's life. But creepiness is in the eye of the beholder. People, learn to live a little. Although this response makes me laugh. Edit again. While browsing the huge honking directory of photos scanned in 2012, I found the perfect illustration of us for Reddit. This is us, typing her master's thesis, on WordPerfect for DOS. This would be early 1990, about a year after we met. It was especially challenging because I still didn't speak any Hungarian to speak of, but had to type it for her thesis, which was challenging. I really want to bang this girl. Forever. I thought, please shut up. You are ruining 300 for everyone. Weird. I just realized I don't remember my first thought about my wife when I met her. I do remember coming home from that first date and telling my roommate I think I just met the woman I'm going to marry. That was pretty cool. My friends, who were friends with my now wife, told me that she had asked them about me after she saw me at a party. I didn't see her at that party, but the next time we were all together my friend said there's that girl that was asking about you last week. My first thought was that they were making fun of me. I'm not the most social guy, so I'd go talk to this girl that was crazy beautiful. But I went up and talked to her and she was the coolest person ever. That was 21 years. 15 of them married to each other. And 2 kids ago. She's even more beautiful now at 40 than she was at 19 when I met her. Boy, this girl is really pretty. She'd never be into me. Better not try to fall for her. He happened to live with 2 really tall roommates, so he seemed super short by comparison. He isn't tall, but he isn't vertically challenged by any means, either. So it's totally unfair that I remember thinking, that little guy is hot. Her boyfriend is a ducking tool. Luckily she realized that herself not long after and now she's stuck with me until she realizes how much of a tool I am. It's the circle of life. Can she really be as awkward as I feel? Right after I asked her to buy me an Americano because my wallet wasn't in my usual pocket and I thought I left it at home. I spent the rest of the date, after we sat down, trying not to notice my wallet poking my butt on the wrong side. Rather than try and give a funny answer, I'm going with what I really, actually thought when I was introduced to my future wife in college. I was just absolutely struck with a feeling of how beautiful I thought she was, and how amazing she was. I had dated a fair number of girls in high school and college and thought I was totally immune from being head over heels for someone. I found out in an instant that I was wrong. My mouth went dry and my heart felt like it was beating twice as hard as usual. No joke. I'm not bulleting when I say I feel the same way today, 30 years later, when I see her. Especially if I've been away for a few days on business. I know she's gotten older, but I still see the same face I saw back then, and it makes me so happy, every time. Sorry if that's too sappy, but I'm an incredibly lucky person. Honestly, first thought was, he is so not my type. Why am I attracted to him? I couldn't put my finger on what made him so special. But I knew we were going to be together. It was like seeing a bright green light in a sea of red ones. That he was handsome and well dressed, and that he was really positive and upbeat. He says his first impression of me was ooh, I like that fat ass. He likes me. I hope he doesn't try to ask me out. She's out of my league. After 3.5 years of marriage I still feel that way. I'm not sure how I hoodwinked her, but I've somehow managed to keep the charade going. Can I answer as a widowed man? I knew within 5 minutes of meeting her that I wanted to know more and more and more. We went out for a casual dinner. We were set up by a mutual friend, and it lasted 3 hours because I couldn't get enough of her. And, as I found out later, her of me. I should have known right then and there. But it did take one more date. Read on. She was freaking hot, but more importantly funny. Smart, kind, funny again. Girl was hilarious, and so easy, not in a sex way, in a personality way. It was like we were made to be together. We were finishing each other's sentences on a first date. It was so soulmatey that I thought she was me but with nice girly parts. Our second date, 2 days later, is when I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. It was just so natural. All we did was talk and laugh. I think we annoyed the cocktail waitress because we hardly were drinking. We had our first deep kiss outside the bar we had met up at, and I remember her saying oh, whoa, right after the kiss. I thought the same, but just smiled at her. I remember asking her what she was up to the next night, and she confessed that she had a previously scheduled date. Remember, we had known each other for only about 50 hours at this point. I suggested she shouldn't break it, because it would be rude. And because I was pretty confident that we were going to be together forever regardless of what she did that following night. She didn't break that date, but she called me at about 7 PM. So it must have been a one drink and out. Needless to say, We were pretty inseparable after that, and there were no more dates with any other people, on both sides. She did spend the rest of her life with me, and it was too short, but it was really, really terrific. We were 12 and in math class. Some boys in the class were being loud and giving this new kid a weird nickname. I looked up and saw this gawky, ridiculously skinny, pasty white geek in glasses and braces. I remember thinking he had really good posture for being so short and a goofy smile. 13 years later we're married, and he became the hottie, edit, because so many asked. Oh god, there's that girl that talks all the time to every single person. Oh god. She's getting on the elevator with me. She's going to talk to me. Oh god. It's just the two of us. Oh god. Here it goes. I have to make actual conversation. Her. I like your shirt. Me. Oh. Thank you. I was 16 or 17, she would have been 13. We went to the same school. Different grades. I remember her almond-shaped, brown eyes. She had a round face, with soft flat bone structure and features. Her face was round, but not chubby round. She was well proportioned, with the exception of being small-chested. She was petite and beautiful. Her adult height was 5 foot even. I remember her seeming flawless as if photographed through a softening filter. She came from a weird possessive home, totally disallowed to be around boys, and never allowed out of sight, to school, to home, unless otherwise chaperoned. She and her sister rebelled massively because of this. She and I kissed once while she was at a friend's house, near one of my friend's house. That was the end of our school year's encounters. After that we lost touch. She became tangled up with a terrible crowd, began using crank, an older type of methamphetamine, and eventually became pregnant by a true deadbeat scumbag. She further became involved in several hot check and identity theft schemes. Her life, totally unbeknownst to me, was in shambles. 10 years later, I got a random message from her on MySpace. It was basically, "Hi, do you remember me?" Do I remember her? Absolutely. I had no idea about the tragic choices and life that she had fallen into. I simply remembered that beautiful young girl. We talked twice, via MySpace message. Then I asked her out to dinner. I drove to her mother's home, and picked her up. Her mum answered the door and immediately asked me, in a friendly way, "Are you bad people? My daughter means so much to me, and I just got her back. Do you use drugs?" To which I responded, no, but I'm Catholic, as I had learned that being Catholic is frowned upon in my area of Baptist and Church of Christ religious dominance. She laughed and waved me in. There was my Jennifer. She was beautiful, just as I remembered. I can't tell you what she was wearing, as I could not take my eyes off her face. I think it was just a basic shirt and some capri pants. Her brown blonde hair was partially pulled back, bobby pinned on top, with large curls cascading down from the bobby pinned section. She smiled and I forgot my own name. We quickly left, as her mum was being a bit of a helicopter. Understandable, as Jennifer had only been out of rehab, and a major surgery to save her arm after a terrible non-intentional self-inflicted wound resulted in infection. You could not tell from looking at her, but this beautiful woman had survived hell, and was only 3 months into a real recovery. We went to our first date. I had a chicken fried steak and she had a BLT. We talked for 2 hours, during which time she told me of her tragic 10-year hiatus and also informed me she had CML, a slow-moving, but serious type of leukemia. I knew before that date was over, that our time was likely limited. I couldn't care less. I knew I wanted us to have the best years together, no matter how few. We dated for a few months, and then I asked her to move into my home, with full intention of getting married. Mostly I just wanted her out of her mum's home to prevent any relapse caused by a long list of well-earned, justified sour feelings between them. They loved each other and were getting along, but they always strained one another. She had never learned how to adult. I watched her become a lady within just a few months. As we grew together, she converted to Catholicism, in part for me, but she also fell in love with our church, the sisters, and we had found happiness in our lives. We were married in December of 2009. It was beautiful. She was beautiful. We lived so happy. As a family, I raised her daughter as my own. for 3 years until she, Jennifer, passed away from a failed bone marrow transplant in 2011. Unfortunately, her daughter, my stepdaughter, was taken from me by my wife's father the same weekend Jennifer died. He refused to sign guardianship over to us. Based on my wife's past, he took my daughter 3 hours after I buried my wife. He had failed miserably in his expectations of what his daughters should be. This, I believe, he thought was his third and final chance to get it right. They moved to a city 5 hours away. Eventually he screwed it up with my daughter too. She can't stand him and ran away and cut herself until he finally signed her over to an aunt. Despite all the sadness, I would not change a single thing about my story. I loved Jennifer with all my heart, and she helped me become a better man by loving me in return. That beautiful girl is looking at me. Alright, win for me. Holy it. She's walking over. Holy it, she is walking over to talk to me. Jesus Christ, Smockin' Pollicut. Close your mouth. Think of something cool to say. Oh my god, did she just say something? She did. And you weren't listening. Don't duck this up because of your inner monologue. Oh my god, how have I not responded yet? Say something. Say anything. Hey. Sup. Nailed it. Genius. Worked out okay in the end. Edit. My first gold is about my wife. I will never hear the end of this. But thanks. Kind stranger. Edit 2. Yeah, I guess the inner monologue is JD-esque. Totally true though. Edit 3. Jesus Christ, Smockin' Pollicut. Now that I've seen that, I can't unsee it. Will use eye roll. You guys are the best. I'm going to duck him. May not be the classiest, but it's honest. I loved her look. Very pretty and earthy. She was singing on stage and has a beautiful voice. I'm a musician, so I knew I had to go talk to her afterward. I was around 21 years old, so the main thing I was thinking is please don't be in high school. Please don't be high school. I met my wife while standing in line at Starbucks. I had ordered a soy white chocolate mocha. She was standing behind me and heard my order and commented, "Hey, that's my drink but girly." I turned around and saw that she was dressed really nice and had big beautiful bright green eyes. So I blurted out, "You're an asshole. What's your name? We've been married a year now and have our first baby due in December." She's super hot. I wonder what's wrong with her. She walked into my brother's wedding reception with my female cousin. I turned to my cousin next to me and asked if we were related to her. He said no. I told him I was going to get me some of that. Married for almost 6 years now. Why is he wearing bedroom slippers in a bar? Before we were even introduced, I got one look at him and thought, oh, that's the guy. What am I going to do? I'm going to have to break up with my boyfriend and move out of our apartment. That was April of 1989. We've been married now over 20 years. I met my wife in Italy at the Trevi Fountain. I was double fisting 2 Heinekens and saw her across the plaza and leaned over to my best friend and said, "I'm going to marry that girl." He said, "Shut the duck up, you're drunk." He is much handsomer than his POF profile pictures. After our coffee date was over, I sure would like to see this man again. Married 2.5 years later. My husband and I met online one afternoon and 30 minutes later he was standing on my doorstep. I opened the door, looked into his eyes and thought, now I'm home. We were married 4 months and 2 days later. I thought it was too easy. He seemed so easy to be around for me, and I never had to pretend I was something I wasn't. I was all me, right from the get-go, and he was himself too. 8 years later we are married now with a home and lots of pets. I wasn't sure if she was into me, even though she was always eyeballing me on our bus to school. My friends told me that she liked me and they knew that I was kind of shy, so they dared me to ask her out. They called me chicken until one day I sat next to her on the bus. That was 2010 and we've been married since 2013. I love her to death, but it's been hard on her since she was diagnosed with Crohn's a few weeks ago. Edit. She still doesn't know that it was a dare that made me ask her out. Edit 2. I really appreciate everyone who is giving me advice that I can share with my wife about Crohn's. You guys are awesome and have made my day. Edit 3. Woke up this morning to a metric ducton of messages. I really appreciate everyone who sent commented advice. I will be screen capping a lot of this to show to my wife. I think she will be happy to know that there are people out there that have Crohn's and have gone into remission. Thanks again everyone. Have a wonderful day. Not married, but I have been with the same guy for almost 16 years. The first time I saw him I thought, oh, good, someone old enough to buy beer. I remember my grandmother telling me about the first time she met my grandfather and how much she disliked him initially and thought he was really arrogant. Then she discovered that the way he acted then wasn't really the way he was. He was just really nervous because he thought that she was so beautiful. She gave him another chance and they ended up married for over 40 years until his death. He's kinda cute and seems nice. I wonder what this bland stuff he's talking about is. Maybe he'll teach me. Semicolon. Married 12 years and 4 kids later. We don't play band anymore, but he was teaching me the rules when we had our first kiss. I didn't like her. I thought she was pompous. This was September of 2000. I had just come back to work at Linens and Things, LNT, because I had quit the job I left LNT for. Well, I was originally the front-end supervisor, but ended up in housewares because she had taken my spot when she transferred to our store. So, my first day back is an opening shift, and we're doing the morning meeting. She is just going off on how nobody seems to know how to take a check, and how the front-end processes were supposed to work, etc. And I'm just thinking to myself, holy Christ on a dipstick, this chick is rich. We slackers eventually brought her around to the dark side, but I actually had started liking her before the seduction was complete. I was on a smoke break with a friend, and I asked, what do you think about future MRS? Team Zero Bliterate? The response was immediate. Huh? Really? Are you sure? Well, we ended up going out on our first date on the 13th of January, 2001. We got married the 16th of January, 2004. We dated briefly in high school but never had sexy time. With no communication, and 7 years later I figured I'd finish what I started. We've been together 1 year now. Think we're gonna get married when our financial situation is better. TLDR, the ass was fat. I was standing on the curb outside the airport in Denver. I caught her looking at me. God, she was beautiful. She looked away. I looked away. I looked back and she was looking at me again. We ended up at the same conference. I was living in Indianapolis. She was living in Baltimore. We spoke at the conference. I flew home. She started to fly home. A snowstorm closed BWI and forced her flight to land in Indy. She was in Indy for 4 days. Married 13 years. 2 kids. Living the dream. It was a folk dance party and I directed a wordless invitation to dance at the general vicinity of 3 girls. And my now wife responded. This is gonna sound really shallow. It probably is. But to be honest, I was slightly disappointed that it wasn't the more busty girl right next to her who responded to my invitation. Oh, Q crap. I'm not being stood up. Met at a coffee shop after talking online. She was kinda late, like, about 15 minutes or so. I have some social anxiety and it was starting to ramp up to the point where I wasn't sure if I'd prefer to meet her or just go home. Quite glad I stuck around, comma. Whoa, she has some very spiked hair and her attitude, geez. Ended up asking her out and married 3 years later. Ha, there's a man on the couch. I'd left work earlier than normal and gone over to my next door neighbors to hang out a bit because I was feeling head itchy and I didn't want to spend the entire evening alone in my apartment with nothing to do. Turns out, he'd invited over an interesting guy he met at a bar. We got to talking. Then we started hanging out. Then we became best friends. Then I went through that phase where I had a big crush on him but I didn't want to do anything about it. Because I didn't want to lose his friendship if things didn't work out. Then I got to the point where I didn't care anymore. I really wanted to sleep with this guy. And now we've been married for a few years. Just had our first kid. We'll find out if our second is going to be a boy or girl next week.